Welcome to Myths for Sleep. Tonight, we begin a gentle journey into a forgotten world. A world hidden beneath the canopy of ancient jungles where stone cities sleep and time moves in circles, not lines. This is the story of the Maya, not as warriors or ruins, but as dreamers, timekeepers, and children of the stars. So, close your eyes. Let the hum of the rainforest guide you, and drift with me into the whispers of a civilization that still breathes beneath the leaves. Let us begin. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Jungle. The land before time. Before the first memories, before time even had a name, there was a world of pure, untouched life, a dream of the Creator. It was a land nestled gracefully between two vast oceans, a ribbon of deep green woven from jungle, mountains, and winding rivers. Later, people would call it Mesoamerica, but in that dawn of time, it had no name. It was simply the land. And the land was breathing. Listen. Listen closely. Can you hear it? It is not silence. True silence did not exist here. It was a grand and endless symphony, played by millions and millions of nature's musicians. The bass notes were the sound of the wind humming over the peaks of the tall volcanoes, where the air was thin and pure, carrying the cool mist of the clouds. These mountains, silent giants, stood like guardians, with thin plumes of smoke, the breath of their deep slumber, drifting from their summits. They had watched the birth of the sun and moon countless times, and in their hearts, the fire of creation smoldered. The high notes were the songs of 1,000 species of birds. Imagine a resplendent quetzal, its emerald feathers shimmering like jewels in the early light. It would soar through the air, its long, graceful tail flowing behind it like a ribbon from a rainbow, its call as clear as a flute, a greeting to the morning. Or imagine the steady, rhythmic tapping of a toucan, its great, colorful beak a work of art, its call echoing through the forest like nature's own clock, marking the pace of life. The bird songs mingled, sometimes soaring, sometimes chirping, weaving a living tapestry of sound, joyful and full of energy. And then there were the sounds in the middle, the deep, soulful whispers of the jungle. This was where life exploded with its greatest intensity. The canopy of the giant ceiba trees, the ancient mahogany, and 1,000 other nameless plants knitted together to form a ceiling of green, shielding the forest floor from the harsh tropical sun. The light that filtered through became gentle, dappled, like golden coins dancing on the damp moss. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, of wild blossoms, and of decay. The sacred cycle where death feeds new life. Slow down and look at your feet. The ground is covered in a carpet of moss as soft as velvet, cool and damp. Ferns unfurl their intricate spirals like tiny hands, and there, hiding beneath a large leaf, is a wild orchid. It does not show off. It is there, humble, its pale, purple petals as thin as silk, its sweet fragrance a secret for those who know to pause and listen. The jungle was a world of constant motion. A howler monkey would swing from branch to branch, its call echoing not in fear, but as a declaration of being, a way of telling the world, I am here. A flock of blue morpho butterflies would float by, their wings shimmering like pieces of a moving sky. A jaguar, the lord of the shadows, would move silently through the undergrowth, its spotted coat the perfect camouflage. Its paws were so light they made no sound. Only its amber eyes glowed in the shade, watching the world with a quiet majesty. And in this world, there were gods. They did not yet have names or faces carved in stone or temples built in their honor. They were the primal spirits, the unseen energies that were woven into the fabric of everything. They were the essence of the land itself. There was a god of the wind, an energy called Ik. The wind was not a destructive storm, but a breath. It was the gentle breeze that caressed the hillsides, stirring the wildflowers. It was the cool air that blew from the sea, carrying the taste of salt. It crept between the leaves, carrying their whispers. It carried pollen to faraway places, helping life to spread. When you felt a breeze pass by, it was Ik telling you an ancient story, a story told not with words, but with feeling. There was a god of the water, Ha. Water was not a raging flood, but the source of life. It was the rivers that snaked like giant silver serpents, patiently building up rich soil along their banks. It was the lakes high in the mountains, their surfaces as still as mirrors, reflecting the vast blue sky. And most specially it was the cenotes, the sacred sinkholes, the eyes of the earth. The water in a cenote was clear, cool, and impossibly deep. It was believed to be a portal to the underworld, a place of mystery and spirits. And Ha was the rain, falling gently to wash the forest clean, bringing purity and nourishment to every living thing. There was a god of fire, Kak. Fire was not a destructive blaze, but the energy of change. It slept deep inside the volcanoes, its breath the white smoke that curled from their mouths. Sometimes it would stir in its sleep, and the ground would tremble gently, a reminder of the power that lay beneath. Rarely, it would awaken fully. Then molten lava would flow, a sight both terrifying and magnificent. But after this destruction, the volcanic ash would create a new layer of soil, richer and more fertile than ever before. Kak was the god of destruction and rebirth, an eternal cycle. And there was a god of the earth, of the land itself. This god had no single name, for it was everything. It was the ground beneath your feet, the mountains, the jungles, the infinite patience. It was the Great Mother, embracing all, from the tallest tree to the smallest moss. High above, ruling over day and night, were the two great divinities. The king of the day was the sun god. Each morning, he began his journey from the east in a chariot of fire. His light banished the darkness and the cold of night, awakening all living things. Under his warmth, flowers opened, animals began their search for food, and the whole jungle hummed with life. His light was warmth, energy, and clarity. When the sun god finished his journey in the west, the moon goddess began her rule of the night sky. She was not brilliant like the day king, but possessed a gentle, mysterious beauty. Her silver light cast a thin veil over the jungle, making everything dreamlike and magical. Under the moonlight, night-blooming flowers released their intoxicating perfume. The owls began their hunt, their large eyes seeing through the darkness. The moon goddess was the ruler of dreams, of secrets, and of the cycles of life, just as she governed the tides of the two great oceans. For thousands and thousands of years, this perfect harmony continued. The land lived and breathed to its own rhythm, the rhythm of the cosmos. No one was there to measure time, to build monuments that challenged the sky, to write down the stories of the gods. The land simply was, in a state of deep meditation, a raw and pristine beauty. Imagine one more time. You are standing in a valley surrounded by green mountains. A clear river flows past, so clear you can see every pebble on the bottom. The air is so fresh you can feel it cleansing your body and soul. You are not an intruder here. You are part of the scenery. You are one with the wind, the water, the earth. The land was waiting. Like a mother dreaming of her first child, the land was dreaming of the beings who would soon appear. Beings who would stand on 2 feet, who would have clever hands to make tools, who would have curious minds to wonder about the stars, and who would have hearts that could feel love and awe for the greatness of nature. They would come, the children of the land. They would learn to listen to the whispers of the wind god Ik, to respect the power of the water god Ha, and to live in harmony with the rhythms of the sun and moon. They would be the people made from this very earth, and they would carry the echo of the jungle within them. But that is a story for a distant tomorrow. For now, in this moment of peace, as night falls and the moon goddess begins her journey, let the symphony of the jungle lull you. The chirping of insects, the croaking of frogs in the marsh, the rustle of leaves in the night breeze. It all blends into a perfect lullaby, a song of the beginning of all things, of a world untouched, pristine, and eternal. Sleep now, and dream of the land before time. Chapter 2. The First Flames. The Birth of the Maya. Thousands of years passed like a long dream for the land. The wind god. Ik still journeyed through the valleys, the water god has still nourished life, and the jungle still breathed to its ancient rhythm. But then one day, a quiet change arrived. It was not loud like an earthquake, nor brilliant like a flow of lava. It came as gently as a falling leaf, but it carried the weight of destiny. It was the arrival of humans. They did not come as conquerors. They carried no swords or war drums. They came like lost children, with wide, wondering eyes and a deep reverence in their hearts. They were small bands of people, families migrating from distant lands to the north, following herds of game, searching for a place to call home. When they first set foot on the edge of the Mesoamerican jungle, they were overwhelmed. Imagine you are one of them. After generations of crossing dry and cold lands, you suddenly stand before an endless sea of green. The air here is warm and humid, embracing you like a blanket. The sounds are so strange. The singing of birds, the drone of insects, the distant call of monkeys. Everything is alive, intense, and a little frightening. In the early days, they lived like shadows in the forest. They learned to move quietly, to recognize the tracks of the deer and the tapir. They learned which fruits were safe to eat, which leaves could heal a wound, and which snakes carried deadly venom. They learned from the animals. They watched the jaguar to learn how to hunt in silence. They watched the monkeys to know which branches were strong enough to climb. They listened to the birds to know when danger was near. They lived in natural caves, hollows carved deep into the mountainsides. These caves were their shelter, protecting them from the rain and from wild beasts. At night, they gathered together around a small fire. That fire was more than just warmth and light. It was the heart of their community. It was where they shared the food they had hunted, where the elders told stories to the children, where they felt safe from the mysterious darkness of the jungle. That fire was the first flame, the flame of survival. They were nomads. Their lives were tied to movement. When the game in one area grew scarce, or when the season for wild fruit had passed, they would gather their few belongings and move on. They had no concept of owning the land. The land did not belong to them. They belonged to the land. They were merely guests, passing through gently, trying to leave no trace but memories. But slowly, another change began. A change even more profound than their migration. It did not begin in their feet, but in their hands and their minds. A woman, perhaps while gathering food, noticed a special kind of wild grass. Its seeds were small and hard, but when they were ground and cooked, they had a strange sweetness and soothed the ache of hunger. She began to collect these seeds on purpose. Then one day, a few seeds were spilled near the mouth of the cave. A few weeks later, from that very spot, new grasses grew. It was a moment of awakening. A spark of understanding lit up in their minds. They did not have to follow their food. They could create it. This process did not happen overnight. It stretched across many generations, a lesson passed from mother to daughter, from father to son. They began to experiment. They chose the biggest, healthiest seeds to plant. They learned that this grass needed plenty of sun and water. They discovered that if they cleared the weeds around it, the plant grew stronger. And then, over hundreds of years of selection and care, from that humble wild grass, a magical plant was born. A plant with a tall stalk, long leaves and plump ears, with straight rows of kernels as golden as drops of sunlight. It was maize. For the people who would become the Maya, maize was not just food. It was a sacred gift. It was life itself. The birth of agriculture changed everything. It was a quiet revolution. They no longer needed to wander the forests. Now they could stay in one place, near the fertile patches of land they had cleared. They began to build their first huts. Not cold caves, but homes made from branches, mud, and palm leaves. They were simple, small shelters, but they were home. And when the first homes were built, the first villages were formed. Imagine a small village in a peaceful valley beside a gentle river. A dozen or so round or oval huts are clustered together. At the center of the village is a common space where the community fire is never allowed to die. This was the second flame, the flame of community. Life now had a new rhythm, a rhythm dictated by the sun, the rain, and the life cycle of the maize. When the dry season came, the men worked together to clear a patch of forest, leaving the largest trees standing. When the felled trees were dry, they would burn them. The fire of cock was no longer a terrifying, destructive force, but a tool, a friend that helped them clear the land and return nutrients to the soil. The smoke that rose to the sky was like a prayer, a signal to the gods above. When the first rains of the water god Ha fell, the women and children began to plant. They used a sharpened stick to poke a small hole in the earth, gently placed a few precious kernels of maize inside, and covered it over. They worked in a respectful silence, as if performing a sacred ritual. Then they waited. They watched the sun each day, praying for it to grant enough light and warmth. They listened for the sound of thunder, hoping it was a sign of coming rain. Their lives were now deeply intertwined with the gods of nature. The sun god was no longer just a ball of fire in the sky. He was the deity who gave life to their maze. The rain god was no longer just a weather phenomenon. He was the deity who decided if they would have a bountiful harvest or a famine. This dependence gave birth to the third flame, the flame of faith. On moonlit nights after a day's work, the whole village would gather around the central fire. They ate the first tortillas, a simple food that held all of their hard work and hope. The elders would retell the old stories of their nomadic days, of great beasts and faraway lands. But now, they had new stories to tell. They told of the maize mother, a benevolent goddess who had given them the sacred plant. They believed that humans were made from maize dough, just like the tortillas they ate every day. This created a deep connection, a sense of humility. They were not masters of nature. They were the children of the corn, a part of the land. They began to pay closer attention to the stars. They noticed that the appearance of a certain constellation always signaled that it was time to plant, and another constellation signaled the harvest. The night sky became a giant calendar, a reliable guide. They began to feel a great order in the universe, a harmony between the heavens, the earth, and humanity. Life in these first villages was simple and peaceful. People worked together and shared with one another. There were no kings, no priests. The leader of a family clan might be the most experienced elder, the one who knew the most about the weather and the crops, but he was just a farmer like everyone else. These small villages, scattered throughout the valleys and highlands of Mesoamerica, were like tiny sparks in the long night of history. Each village was its own world, with slightly different customs and stories, but they all shared a common fire, the fire of a new culture taking root. They had come a long way from the wandering hunter-gatherers. They had learned how to turn a wild land into a home. They had found stability in kernels of corn, connection in the village community, and meaning in their relationship with the gods of the sun and water. They were not yet the Maya that we know. They had not yet built the great pyramids, invented a complex writing system, or calculated the cycles of the heavens with astonishing accuracy. But the flame had been lit. It was the flame of settled life, the flame of community, the flame of faith, and most importantly, the flame of a civilization stirring in its sleep. It was a small, warm, and humble flame, flickering in huts of mud and thatch, but it held within it the potential to one day blaze brightly, lighting up a corner of human history. Listen closely. In the rustle of the cornfield, in the night breeze, in the crackle of the village fire, you can hear the promise of great things to come. The promise of stone cities, of divine kings, and of astronomers who could read the minds of the gods. But for tonight, just stay in the peace of this small village. Feel the warmth of the fire, the smell of fresh tortillas, and the safety of community. This is the source. This is where it all began. Sleep now, and dream of the first flames, the flames that gave birth to the Maya. Chapter 3. Stone and Star. The Rise of the Cities. Many generations passed since the first kernels of corn were planted in the earth. The small, humble villages had taken root and grown, just like the maize in their fields. Bountiful harvests followed one another, the population grew, and the huts of mud and thatch became more and more numerous. The fire at the center of the village burned brighter, warmer, drawing more people to gather around it. But then, a new idea began to sprout in the minds of the children of the maize mother. An idea as quiet and as powerful as the birth of agriculture itself. It was the idea of permanence. Their lives were woven from temporary things. The thatch roof of a hut had to be replaced after every rainy season. The cornfield had to be cleared and burned each year. Even their own bodies were just temporary homes for the soul, destined to return to the earth. But the gods were different. The gods were eternal. The sun rose every morning without fail. The moon waxed and waned in a perfect cycle. The stars were always there, glittering in the night sky like diamonds on the cloak of the universe. And so, they began to yearn. They yearned to create something that would last longer than a single lifetime. Something to show their reverence for the eternal gods. A prayer made not of smoke and incense, but of stone. This idea did not come from a single person, but was a shared consciousness, a collective dream. It began simply. Instead of building their homes entirely of wood and mud, they began to build foundations of stone pebbles gathered from the riverbeds. A stone foundation made the house stronger, drier. Then they built small stone altars in the center of the village, places where they could leave offerings for the maize mother and the rain god, Chak. These small altars grew taller and larger with each passing generation. A son would build upon the foundation of his father, a grandson upon the work of his grandfather. Each new layer of stone was an affirmation of faith, a continuation of memory. They did not tear down the old, but encased it, honored it. These structures grew from the inside out like a tree adding new rings of age. At the same time, a new group of people began to emerge in their society. They were not the best farmers or the most skilled hunters. They were the ones with a special gift for watching the sky. They were the day keepers. They realized that their lives depended completely on being in harmony with the cosmos. To plant the seeds at the wrong time meant the village would go hungry. To fail to predict a long dry season meant the village would run out of water. The sky was no longer just a beautiful canopy. It was a great book that held all the answers. These people dedicated their lives to reading that book. They recorded the journey of the sun, tracked the path of the moon, and paid special attention to a brilliant star that appeared at dawn and dusk, the planet Venus. They saw that everything had a cycle, that everything repeated in a sacred order. By understanding that order, they could guide their community to live a life of harmony and prosperity. These daykeepers, the first astronomers and priests, gradually became the spiritual leaders. They were the ones who decided when to hold ceremonies, when to plant the seeds, when to harvest. Their words carried the weight of the stars, and it was they who gave direction to the dream of permanence. We must build man-made mountains, they said, so that we may be closer to the gods. We must build temples on top of these mountains and align them with the rising sun on the solstice or with the rising of Venus, so that when the gods look down, they will see that we understand their divine order. And so, From the largest of the villages, the first cities began to rise. They did not spring up from the command of a king, but from a common effort, a great collaboration. The farmers, after their harvest was done, would contribute their labor to the common work. They went deep into the jungle to find the hardest wood. They went to quarries, using tools of stone and hardwood to cut enormous blocks of limestone. Imagine the sound of a construction site from that time. There were no loud machines, only the sharp chip, chip, chip of stone on stone, the chanting of men as they pulled a great block with ropes, the groaning of wooden rollers beneath the immense weight. It was a symphony of human effort, of patience, and of devotion. And then, in the heart of the dense jungle, miracles began to appear. The whispers of the land now had a physical form. Tikal, the giant that touched the sky. One of the first and most powerful whispers was named Tikal. If you were to walk through the Peten jungle, you would feel its presence before you ever saw it. The air would seem to grow thicker, and the echo of history would seem to ring in your ears. And then, through a break in the trees, you would see it. A gray peak of stone, reaching straight for the sky, taller than even the most ancient ceiba trees. It was the top of a pyramid. Tikal was not a gentle city. It was a bold declaration, an ambition to reach the heavens. Its pyramids, especially Temple Dafun and Temple 2 facing each other across a great plaza, were not just places of worship. They were stairways to the sky. Standing at the base of such a structure, you would feel impossibly small, and you would understand the power of the gods and the rulers who built it. Imagine a dawn in Tikal. Mist still hangs between the temples, creating a scene as magical as a fairy tale. The first rays of the sun. God strike the top of the temple of the great jaguar, dyeing it a brilliant orange gold. In the plaza below, the people begin to gather. Women in brightly embroidered tunics called huipilis. Men in white loincloths with long black hair. They do not speak loudly, but whisper among themselves, their awe-struck eyes fixed on the temple high above, where the Ahau, the Holy Lord, is preparing to perform the morning ritual to greet the new day. Life in Tikal was a vertical life. All eyes looked up. It was a city of power, of competition, and of a burning desire to be the center of the Maya universe. Kalakmul, the serpent, that slithered through the jungle. But Tikal was not the only whisper. Farther to the north, hidden in an even denser jungle, there was another voice, another power. It was Kalakmul, the kingdom of the snakehead. If Tikal was an arrow shot straight to the sky, Kalakmul was like a giant serpent, slithering and spreading its power far and wide. It did not have temples as tall and steep as Tikal's, but it was vastly larger. Its structures spread out over an enormous area, connected by raised white causeways called sakbiab. Imagine walking on a sack bay on a moonlit night. The causeway is perfectly straight, made of crushed white limestone, glowing under the moon like a silver ribbon cutting through the dark jungle. Walking on this road, you would feel the order, the control of Kalakmul. These roads were not just for travel. They were arteries carrying soldiers, traders, and messengers, tightening the Snake Kingdom's grip on hundreds of vassal city-states. Kalakmul was a city of politics, of alliances and quiet intrigues. Its power was not in the height of its temples, but in the sprawling reach of its influence. It was Tikal's great rival, and the struggle between these two giants would shape the history of the Maya world for centuries. Copan, the stone heart that could speak. While Tikal and Calakmul competed for power, to the southeast, nestled in a fertile valley, a city chose a different path. It was Copan, the jewel of Maya art and knowledge. Copan did not try to be the tallest or the largest. Copan wanted to be the most beautiful. It has been called the Paris of the Maya world, a center for the art of sculpture. Come to the great plaza of Copan. Here there are no soaring pyramids, but instead, a forest of stone. Dozens of stone monuments, or stelae, stand here, each one an intricate masterpiece. On them, the artists of Copan carved portraits of their kings. But these are not stiff, lifeless images. Look closely at one of the stelae. You can see every detail of the splendid ceremonial robes, every feather of the headdress, every piece of jade jewelry, and especially the face. The lips are slightly parted, as if about to speak. The eyes gaze into the distance, holding both authority and wisdom. The kings of Copan were not just symbols of power. They were people brought back to life in stone with breathtaking vibrancy. And then there is the hieroglyphic stairway. More than 2,200 glyphs are carved on its 63 steps, telling the entire history of the Copan dynasty. It is the longest stone book ever found in the Americas. Standing before it, you feel as though you are listening to the voice of history itself. Every story, every event, carefully recorded so that it would never be forgotten. Copan was a city of memory, of beauty, and of a deep appreciation for knowledge. It was the soul of the Maya world, a place where stone was no longer just a lifeless building material, but had learned to sing and to tell stories. Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, and hundreds of other cities like Palenque, Yaxchilan, and Uxmal. They all rose from the whispers in the jungle. They were the crystallization of a shared dream, a perfect union of stone and star. The stone represented the yearning for permanence on Earth. The star represented the sacred order of the cosmos. These cities completely changed the lives of the Maya people. Now there was a clear division between the urban center and the rural countryside. The farmers still lived in their small villages, growing the corn that fed the entire city. But now, their lives were oriented toward the city. They went there to participate in festivals, to trade goods in the bustling markets, and to gaze in awe at the great monuments that they themselves had helped to build. A complex society had been formed, with divine kings, priests, nobles, artisans, traders, and farmers. But they were all connected by a common pride, a common faith. They were the people of Tikal. They were the people of Calakmul. They were the people of Copan. They had turned the wild jungles into the stage for one of humanity's most brilliant civilizations. They had learned to speak to the gods not just with prayers, but with the language of architecture and astronomy. Tonight, when you look up at the starry sky, imagine yourself standing in the great plaza of Tikal. All around you, the silhouettes of the giant pyramids rise against the heavens. The silence is solemn, broken only by the sound of insects in the surrounding jungle. You can feel the energy of centuries, of millions of people who lived and dreamed and built this place. You are standing at the intersection of stone and star, of the earthly and the divine. Sleep now. and dream of stone cities rising like whispers in the green jungle, cities built to last forever. Chapter 4. Timekeepers of the Cosmos. The sacred calendar night falls on the city of Tikal. The silver light of the moon goddess bathes the towering temple tops, turning them into magical silent mountains. In the great plaza below, the last torches have been extinguished. Silence descends, but it is not an empty silence. It is a silence full of meaning. Look up. The night sky here is not like the sky you usually see. Unfaded by the lights of the modern world, the sky here is a deep, black velvet, studded with millions upon millions of glittering stars. The Milky Way stretches across it like a shining road, a river of souls. For the people of this stone city, the sky was not just a beautiful sight. It was a sacred book, a map of the divine, and most importantly, it was a great clock. The priests, the day keepers, stood on the top of the highest pyramid, not to be physically closer to the sky, but to listen to its heartbeat. And they realized a fundamental truth that shaped their entire worldview. Time is not an arrow flying straight ahead. For us, time is a river that flows in one direction, never to return. Yesterday is lost. Tomorrow has not yet come. But for the Maya, time was not a river, but a great lake, and on its surface were countless concentric circles rippling outward. Time was a cycle. Just as the sun rises and sets, just as the maize plant grows, gives its fruit, and then withers so its seeds can begin a new life. Nothing is lost. Everything returns. Time does not pass by. It repeats, bringing with it different energies and different destinies. They felt time as two hearts beating together in the chest of the universe. One sacred heart, which determined fate, and one earthly heart, which determined the seasons for planting and harvest. The Tzolk'in, the beat of the sacred heart. The first heart, the sacred heart, was called the Tzolk'in, or the count of days. It was a cycle of 260 days, related not to the sun or the moon, but to the cycle of humanity itself, roughly the same amount of time a mother carries a child. It was the calendar of destiny, of spirituality, of the unseen world. Imagine the Tzolk'in as a dance between two partners. The first dancer is a group of 20 spirits, the 20 sacred days. Each day has a name, a symbol, and its own personality. There is Imix, the water lily, symbol of the beginning, of primal potential from the great ocean. There is Ik, the wind, the god we have already met, carrying communication and the breath of life. There is Akbal, darkness and dawn, the world of dreams and introspection. There is Khan, the ripe corn, a symbol of abundance. There is Ajah, the Lord, the day of royalty, power, and enlightenment. These 20 spirits dance hand in hand in an endless circle. The second dancer is simpler, a group of 13 numbers, from 1 to 13. But they are not just numbers. They are 13 levels of divine energy, 13 levels of the heavens. The number 1 is a humble beginning. The number 7 is the point of balance in the middle. The number 13 is the most powerful energy, the completion. Each day, a day spirit would dance with an energy number. For example, the first day of the cycle is 1 Imix. The next day is 2 Ik. The third day is 3 Akbal, and so on. When the 13th day arrives, say 13 Bian, read, the number cycles back to 1, but the day spirit continues on. So the next day would be 1 Ix, Jaguar. When the 20-day spirits have completed their circle, they start again with Imix, while the numbers continue their count. This combination of 20-day spirits and 13 energy numbers creates 260 unique pairings. 20 x 13, 260. Each day has its own name and its own destiny. A child born on the day 4 Ajah was said to have the destiny of a leader. A day like 9, it might be a day of strong winds, good for spreading new ideas, but also capable of bringing chaos. This calendar was woven into the fabric of daily life. A farmer, before planting his seeds, would ask the priest which day was a good day. A couple wishing to marry would choose a day with a harmonious combination. A king, before going to war, would wait for a day that carried the energy of victory. The tzolk'in was not a tool for telling time. It was a guide for living life, a way to live in harmony with the rhythm of the sacred universe. The Hab, the rhythm of the earthly heart. While the tzolk'in heart beat to the rhythm of the divine, the second heart, the Hab, beat to the rhythm of the earth. This was the calendar of the farmer, the calendar of the sun, the rain, and the corn. It had 365 days, very similar to our own year. Imagine the Hab as a circle of farm work. This circle was divided into 18 months, each with 20 days. Each month, or weanal, was named after an agricultural activity or a natural phenomenon. There was the month of Pop, Mat, a time for cleaning the house and preparing. There was the month of Sots, Bat, when the nights began to grow longer. There was the month of Yaxkin, new sun, signaling the planting season. The life of a farmer revolved around this calendar. He knew that when the month of Shen, cave well, arrived, it was time to prepare for the dry season. When the month of Mole gathering began, it was time for the first ears of corn to be harvested. The Hab was a practical, tangible calendar, connected to their sweat and the fruits of their labor. But if you calculate it, 18 months of 20 days each is only 360 days. 18 x 20 arger 360. What about the other 5 days needed to complete the solar year? These last 5 days formed a special, separate month called the Wayeb. This was an incredibly special period of time. It did not belong to any month, nor did it belong to the old year or the new. It was a time that existed outside of time. During the 5 days of the Wayeb, the Maya believed that the veil between the world of the living and the world of the spirits was at its thinnest. The gods of the underworld could wander the earth. This was not a time of loud festivals. On the contrary, it was a time of stillness and reflection. People would stay in their homes, avoid important work, and not travel far. They ate simple food, did not bathe, and kept their fires burning low. It was a time for respectful fear, for purifying oneself, and for preparing for the birth of the new year. It was like a deep breath taken by the universe before beginning a new cycle. The calendar round. The great dance of 52 years. The two hearts, the tzolk'in and the Hab, did not beat separately. They beat together, creating a rhythm that was complex and beautiful. Imagine 2 gears, one with 260 teeth, tzolk'in, and one with 365 teeth, Hab, interlocking with each other. As they turned, each day would have a double name. For example, a day could be 4 Ajah on the tzolk'in, and also the 8th day of the month Kumku on the Hab. How long would it take for a specific combination, like 4 Ajah 8 Kumku, to repeat itself? The answer is 18,980 days, which is almost exactly 52 of our years. This 52-year cycle is called the calendar round. Completing a calendar round was a momentous event, like us celebrating a new century. It marked the end of one era and the beginning of a new one. On the final night of the 52-year cycle, a special ceremony was held. Every fire in the kingdom, from the fire in the temple to the fire in the farmer's hearth, was extinguished. The world was plunged into darkness and silence. Everyone waited nervously, afraid that the sun might not rise again. Then, at the critical moment, the Ahau would use fire sticks to light a new fire on the chest of a sacrificial offering. From that sacred flame, runners would carry the fire throughout the city, lighting the temples once more. From there, the fire was passed to every home, until the entire kingdom was bright again. It was a powerful symbol of rebirth, of the victory of order over chaos. The long count, the river of eternity. But even a 52-year cycle was not grand enough for the Maya thinkers. They wanted to know their place not just within an era, but within the entire flow of time since the creation of the universe. And so they invented a third calendar system, one that was linear and majestic, the long count. If the Tzolk'in and Hab were spinning wheels, the long count was a straight road, a river flowing from the beginning of time. It was not used to predict fates or determine seasons. It was used to record history. Every stone stela, every temple stair was carved with a long count date, marking the exact day that an event took place. It was like us writing the day, month, and year. This system allowed them to pinpoint a specific day over a period of thousands of years with absolute precision. They had determined that this universe was created on a day 4 Ajah 8 Kumku in the distant past, which corresponds to August 11th, 31 to 14 BC in our calendar. From that starting point, they counted time in ever larger units. A K'in, 1 day, a Uinal, 20 days, a Tun, 360 days, a Katun, 20 tuns, about 20 years, and a Baktun, 20 Katuns, about 394 years. For them, history was not a chaotic jumble of events. It was a tapestry woven with precision on the loom of time, with every thread placed exactly where it belonged. The night has grown late on the temple top. The daykeeper priest is still standing there, his eyes looking not at the stars, but through them, into the cosmic machine that turns in perfect order. He can feel the beat of the Tzolk'in in his own veins, feel the rhythm of the Hab in the breath of the earth, and feel his own place in the great river of the long count. He does not feel small. He feels a part of that greatness. He is a timekeeper, a single note in the symphony of the universe. And in that understanding, he finds peace. Sleep now, and dream of the turning wheels of time, slow and steady like the toll of a distant bell. Dream of a world where time is not an enemy, but a wise teacher, always returning to teach us the lessons of the universe. Chapter 5. Gods Who Dreamed the World. In a small hut, nestled on the edge of the city of Copan, a fire flickered and danced. Outside, the night of the jungle had fallen, bringing its chorus of insects and frogs. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of toasted corn and wood smoke. A small child was lying in a hammock, their eyes half closed. Beside them, An old grandmother sat on a low stool, her ancient but nimble hands slowly spinning cotton thread. She looked at her grandchild, smiled, and began to speak, her voice as low and gentle as a flowing river. "Did you know," she began, "that before you and before me, and even before the great kings carved on the stones outside, this world was only silence?" Listen now to her story. In the beginning, there was nothing. There were no people, no animals, no birds, no trees, no stones. There were only two things: a vast, silent sea below, and a vast, empty sky above. All was a great stillness, a flat water under a cloudless sky. Everything was in a deep sleep, a potential not yet awakened. But in that silent water, two gods existed. They did not have solid forms. They were energies, thoughts. The first was Tepeu, the maker. The second was Gutumats, the feathered serpent, covered in the shimmering green feathers of the Quetzal. They floated in the water, hidden beneath their green and blue-green feathers. They were not loud gods. They were thinkers. They had meditated in the silence for thousands and thousands of years. Then one day, they came together and began to talk. Their words were not sounds, but thoughts passed between them. "The time has come," Tepeu whispered. "This emptiness is beautiful, but it is also lonely. What if we were to create something? A world?" "A fine idea," Guchumats replied, his feathers stirring gently. "But if we make a world, who will be there to cherish it? Who will remember us? Who will keep the days?" And so, they came to a decision. They would create life, not for power, but because they longed for praise, for beings who could speak their names and give them thanks. Together, they thought. And as their words were spoken, magic happened. They simply had to say, "Earth," and from beneath the calm water, the land rose up, like a cloud forming in the sky. The mountains grew, the valleys were formed. They said trees, and the forests covered the land. They said rivers, and the waters began to flow. The world was formed, beautiful and alive, but still silent. "Now we need beings that can move," said Guchumats. And they created the animals of the forest. They made the deer to live in the mountains. They made the jaguar and the snake to hide in the shadows. They made the birds to fly in the sky. The gods were pleased with their creations, but when they said to them, "Speak, call our names," the creatures could not. The birds could only sing. The jaguars could only roar. The snakes could only hiss. They could not speak words of thanks. "This will not do," Tepeu sighed. "We need worshippers, not noisemakers." So they tried a second time. They took wet mud and formed it into the shape of people. But these mud beings were too soft. They could talk, but their words were nonsense. They had no minds. And when it rained, they softened and dissolved. Once again, the gods had failed. Undiscouraged, they tried a third time. This time they took wood from the peach tree and the balsa tree and carved it into the shape of people. These wooden people looked just like humans. They could walk, build houses, and have children. Cities of wooden people sprang up everywhere. But they had a fatal flaw. They had no hearts, no memory. They walked mechanically. They ate, they slept, they worked, but they never looked up to the sky. They had forgotten their makers. They treated the animals cruelly, and even the tools in their own homes. The grinding stones, the clay plates, complained of their thoughtlessness. The gods were furious and disappointed. They decided they must destroy these soulless creations. They sent a great flood, a rain of black resin that poured from the sky. The animals and the objects that the wooden people had abused now turned on them. The wooden people tried to climb onto their roofs, but the houses collapsed. They tried to climb the trees, but the trees shook them off. And that, the grandmother said softly, gesturing to the darkness outside, is why you see monkeys in the forest. They are the descendants of the wooden people. They look like us, but they can only screech and swing from branches, a reminder of what it is to have a human form, but not a grateful soul. After the third failure, Tepe and Gutumats had nearly given up. They sat in silence, thinking. Then 4 animals, a jungle cat, a coyote, a parrot, and a crow, brought them good news. They told of a distant mountain where a magical plant grew, with ears of yellow and white corn. The gods went to that mountain. They took the sacred corn, and with the help of a divine grandmother named Exmucain, they ground the kernels into a fine meal. They mixed the white and yellow corn flour with water, creating a dough. From this corn dough, they formed the first 4 men. When they breathed life into these new creations, something miraculous happened. These men were not just alive. They were intelligent. They had hearts. And the first thing they did when they opened their eyes was to see everything in the world, from the tallest tree to the smallest pebble. And they immediately spoke words of thanks. Thank you, O Maker. Thank you, O feathered serpent. We thank you for creating us. The gods were overjoyed. At last, they had succeeded. But then they realized a problem. These corn men were too perfect. They could see and know everything, just like the gods. They will have no need of us, the gods worried. So, they decided to blow a mist into the eyes of the corn men. Their vision became clouded, and they could only see what was near. They were no longer gods, but humans, and so they would not be lonely. The gods created 4 beautiful women from corn to be their wives. These 4 couples are the ancestors of all the Maya people, and that is us, my dear. The grandmother smiled, gently pinching her grandchild's cheek. We are made from corn. That is why it is the most sacred thing. It is not just food for our bodies, it is the very stuff we are made of. When you eat a tortilla, remember that you are nourishing the divine part of yourself. The story of creation was finished, but the world of the gods was vast. The grandmother continued, telling of the other deities who ruled the world that Tepo and Gukumats had dreamed into being. She told of Itzamna, the supreme god, a wise old man with a curved nose and no teeth. He was the god of the heavens, of day and night. He was the one who invented writing and the calendar, who gave knowledge to humanity. Itzamna was not a god who interfered often. He was more like a teacher, the headmaster of the universe, quietly observing everything from above. She told of Chak, the god of rain. Chak was not a gentle old man. He carried a stone axe, and when he was angry, he would strike the clouds with it, creating thunder, lightning, and storms. But Chak was also a necessary god. Without his rains, the corn would not grow. The farmers both feared Chak and pleaded with him to send his gentle rains. He was like a hard-working but sometimes grumpy gardener, always tending the fields of the Maya. And she told of Kukulkan, another name for the feathered serpent Guchumats, when he came to Earth. Kukulkan was a god king, a wise man who came to the Maya and taught them laws, agriculture, and art. He was a god of peace and knowledge. After teaching the people, he sailed away to the east, promising to one day return. Kukulkan was a symbol of hope, of civilization, and of enlightenment. "The gods are everywhere, my child," the grandmother concluded, her voice now almost a whisper, mingling with the crackle of the fire. "They are in the wind, in the rain, in every kernel of corn we eat. This world is their dream, and it is our duty, as the children of corn, to live a life worthy of that dream. We must be thankful, we must work hard, and we must keep the days they have given us." The child did not answer. Their breath was deep and even, lost in sleep. Perhaps in their dream they were walking in the world created by the words of Tepeu and Gukumats, running through golden cornfields tended by Chak, and listening to the lessons of Itzamna. They were a child made of corn and stars, sleeping peacefully in a world dreamed up by the gods. Chapter 6. The Ball Game and the Underworld. Let us imagine that at dusk, just as the sun has set behind the mountains and the sky is turning a deep violet, you are standing alone in a Maya ball court. This space is strange. It is unlike any playing field you have ever known. It is long and narrow, flanked by two high, sloping stone walls. The silence here is unusual. It is not the peaceful silence of a forest, but a heavy, waiting silence. Every sound seems to be swallowed by the stone walls, leaving only the echo of your own breath. This place was called Pits in the ancient Maya tongue, and it was more than just a court. It was a threshold, a crack between the world of the living and another world, a world that lay deep within the earth. That world was called Xibalba, the underworld. In the Maya mind, the cosmos did not just consist of the earth where they lived and the heavens where the gods resided. There was a third realm, a kingdom of darkness and trial that lay beneath. Xibalba was not exactly hell, as we often think of it, a place of eternal punishment. It was more complex. It was the place the sun had to journey through every night after setting in the west, battling the forces of darkness so that it could be gloriously reborn in the east the next morning. Xibalba was a place of testing, of transformation, a necessary part of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And this ball court, with its long, narrow shape, was a physical portal to Xibalba. The game played here was no ordinary game. It was a ritual, a cosmic dance, a reenactment of one of their most important and sacred stories. Watch as the players enter the court. They are the strongest, most agile men, their bodies painted black. They wear only a leather loincloth and protective pads on their hips, thighs, and knees. They do not play with their hands or feet. They are only allowed to use their hips, thighs, and sometimes shoulders to strike a solid, heavy rubber ball. That ball, to them, was not just a ball. It was a symbol of the sun, the moon, or the stars. The player's duty was to keep this sun in motion, to never let it fall lifeless to the ground. They passed the ball to each other, striking it against the sloping walls to bounce it back. Each heavy thud of body against the hard rubber echoed in the still air. This game was not for entertainment. It was a cosmic responsibility. And to understand why it was so important, we must listen to the story of two brave twin brothers, the greatest heroes of the Maya. This story is told in their sacred book, the Popol Vuh. Once upon a time, the grandmother would tell, there were two brothers named Hunhunapu and Vukubhunapu. They loved to play the ball game. Every day they would play with such passion that the sound of the ball echoed all the way to the underworld, disturbing the lords of Xibalba. Angered by the noise, the evil lords tricked the two brothers into coming down to Xibalba and challenged them to a game. Through treachery and deceit, the lords won and sacrificed both brothers. The head of Hunhunapu was hung on a dry tree, and miraculously the tree immediately bore fruit and became a calabash tree. Many years later, the daughter of one of the lords of Xibalba, a maiden named Exquich, grew curious and approached the strange tree. As she drew near, the skull of Hunhunapu spoke to her and spat a drop of saliva into her palm. Instantly, she became pregnant. Fearing her father's wrath, she fled to the surface world and gave birth to twin boys, Hunapu and Exbalank. The twins grew up, and just like their father and uncle, they were brilliant ball players. And just like their father, the sound of their playing once again disturbed the lords of Xibalba. History repeated itself. The twins received an invitation to a match in the underworld. But Hunahpu and Exbalanka were not naive like their father. They were clever, brave, and always stood by each other. Their journey to Xibalba was a series of deadly trials. They had to cross a river of scorpions, a river of blood, and a river of pus. But they passed through them all. When they arrived at the palace of the lords of Xibalba, they had to face a series of trap houses. The House of Gloom, where they had to keep a cigar lit all night without consuming it. The House of Cold, the House of Jaguars, the House of Bats. In every trial, through their cleverness and sometimes with magic, the twins were victorious, which made the lords furious. Finally, they faced the lords on the ball court. The game was incredibly tense. The lords used a ball studded with sharp obsidian blades, but the twins dodged it. The match was a battle of wits, a struggle between light and darkness, between life and death. Knowing they could not defeat the lords by force, the twins devised a great plan. They pretended to lose and allowed themselves to be sacrificed. They were burned on a great pyre, and their ashes were scattered in the river. The lords of Xibalba were ecstatic, thinking they had finally gotten rid of their tormentors. But 5 days later, the twins were reborn from the water, first in the form of fishmen. Then they transformed themselves into wandering performers, traveling through Xibalba, performing dances and magic tricks. Their most famous trick was one where one brother would cut off the other's head and then reattach it as if nothing had happened. News of their amazing act reached the lords. They summoned the twins and demanded that they perform the trick. After Hunapu was miraculously killed and brought back to life, the lords, in their arrogance, excitedly demanded, "Do it to us, sacrifice us, and then bring us back to life." The twins happily agreed. They sacrificed the first lord, then the second, but of course they did not bring them back. In this way, the hero twins defeated all the lords of Xibalba, not with force, but with intelligence and sacrifice. They had conquered death. After their victory, they found their father's head and revived his spirit. Their father could not return to the surface world, but he became the maze god, the god of life and rebirth. As for Hunapu and Exbalanque, they ascended into the sky, one becoming the sun, the other the moon, forever ruling the cycle of day and night together. And that is why, the grandmother would say, her voice now deep with meaning, the ball game is so sacred, my child. Every time the players step onto the court, they are not just playing a game. They are reenacting the journey of Hunapu and Exbalanque. They are reminding the universe that even when the sun, the ball, falls into darkness, Xibalba, it will rise again. This game is a promise, a guarantee that life will triumph over death. So what of the sacrifices that happened after the game? Was it a cruel act? In our eyes, perhaps it seems so. But in the Maya worldview, it was the highest honor. The one who was chosen, whether it was the captain of the winning or losing team, a detail lost to history, was not seen as a victim. He was seen as a messenger, a hero chosen to personally journey to Xibalba, to carry the hero twins' triumph once more to the lords of the underworld. His death was not an end. It was a transformation. He became part of the cosmic story, ensuring that the order of the world was maintained, that the corn would continue to grow, and that the sun would continue to rise. It was a meaningful sacrifice, an act of supreme courage for his community. It was not something to be feared, but something to be revered. And Xibalba, that underworld, was not a place to be feared. It was a necessary part of existence, just as the roots of a tree must go deep into the dark earth so that the tree can reach for the sunlight. So it is with people, so it is with the soul. One must pass through darkness to find the light. Listen again to the silence of the ball court. It is no longer an empty silence. It is now filled with stories, with courage, and with profound meaning. It is the stage for the greatest drama of all, the eternal struggle between life and death, and the promise of rebirth. Sleep now, and do not be afraid of the dark. Remember that, like the hero Hunapu, the sun always returns after the long night. Dream of a world where even in the game of death, one can find the promise of eternal life. Chapter 7. People of Corn and Stars. Now let us turn away from the grand world of gods and solemn rituals. Let us return to the very heart of the Maya civilization. We will not find it in the tallest temples or the tombs of kings, but in the humble huts, in the rhythm of daily life. Let us listen to the story of the people made from corn, who lived their lives under the stars. The sky is still black, with only the last few stars fading in the west. But inside a small oval-shaped hut with a thatched roof, on the outskirts of the city of Tikal, life is already stirring. No rooster crows. The rhythm of the morning here is marked by a different sound, an ancient and familiar sound, the steady scraping sound of stone grinding on stone. It is the sound of Ixchel. The young woman sits on the hard-packed earth floor, her back straight, her long black hair neatly braided. In front of her is a smooth, slightly curved slab of basalt called a metate. In her hands is a rounder stone, a mano. Between the two stones are kernels of corn that were soaked overnight in lime water to soften their husks and unlock their nutrients. She begins to grind, steady, rhythmic. Her body moves back and forth in a dance she learned from her mother, who learned it from her grandmother. The scraping sound is not a chore. It is the heartbeat of the home. It is the morning's lullaby. With every push of the stone, she is not just grinding corn. She is preparing life for her family. She is reenacting the sacred act of the first grandmother Exmu Cain from the creation story. She is turning the gift of the gods into the food that will nourish the children of corn. Her husband, Balaam, awakens to that familiar sound. He sits up in his hammock, stretching. He is a farmer. His body is strong, his skin weathered by the sun and wind. He does not need a calendar carved in stone to know what must be done today. He looks up at the lightning sky through the doorway, feels the humidity in the air, and he knows. He knows the earth is thirsty. He knows his young corn plants need tending. Ixchel quickly forms the fine corn dough into thin, round cakes and expertly cooks them on a flat piece of pottery over the fire. The aroma of fresh tortillas fills the small hut, a scent of safety, of family. Their breakfast is simple, just the hot tortillas and a bowl of a thick corn porridge called atoll, perhaps sweetened with a little honey. But it is enough to give them energy for the long day ahead. They eat in silence, sharing the start of the new day. Their two small children, a boy and a girl, are still fast asleep, their gentle breaths a testament to the peace of this home. After the meal, Balaam slings a cloth bag over his shoulder, holding a few tortillas for his lunch and a gourd of water. He picks up his digging stick. Before he steps out the door, he turns to look at his wife. No words are spoken, but a look is enough. A wish for a safe day, a promise to return. Balaam's world is the milpa, his cornfield. But it is not just a cornfield. A milpa is a garden of wisdom, a miniature ecosystem passed down through generations. There he does not only plant corn, he plants the three sisters. The corn grows tall, providing a natural pole. The beans climb the cornstalk, supporting it and adding nitrogen to the soil, and below, the squash spreads its large leaves across the ground, keeping the soil moist and preventing weeds. The three sisters live in harmony, supporting one another, just like a family. Balaam's work is not to conquer nature. He is a coordinator, a caretaker. He talks to his plants. He asks permission from the earth god before he pushes his stick into the soil. He looks to the sky and whispers a prayer to the rain god, Chak, asking him not to be too angry, nor too neglectful. He works under the heat of the sun god, sweat soaking the back of his tunic. It is hard work, but there is a deep joy in it. He feels the connection between himself and the land. He does not own this land. He belongs to it. He is its caretaker, and in return, it nourishes his family. He is a child of corn, and this is how he shows his gratitude. Meanwhile, back at the hut, Ixchel's world is just as busy. After cleaning, she feeds the flock of turkeys and checks on the rows of chili peppers and tomatoes in the small garden behind the house. Then, she sits down to her favorite work, weaving. She uses a simple loom called a backstrap loom. One end of the loom is tied to a post of the hut, the other is fastened around her back. By leaning forward or backward, she can control the tension of the threads. Her hands move swiftly, her fingers like dancers. She is not weaving a plain piece of cloth, she is weaving stories. On the emerging fabric, complex patterns begin to appear. A diamond in the center represents the universe. Zigzag lines are the symbol of the feathered serpent. Small human figures are her ancestors. Every color has meaning. Red is blood, life. Yellow is corn, the sun. Green is royalty, the jungle. Black is the night, the underworld. Her cloth is a book. It tells the story of her family, her village, her people's world view. When she wears the huipil she has woven with her own hands, she is not just wearing clothes, she is wearing the universe. Her work, just like Balaam's, is a sacred, creative act. He weaves life from the soil, and she weaves meaning from thread. In the afternoon, when the sun is less fierce, Ixchel calls her children. Her older son is already out in the fields with his father learning. Her young daughter stays home with her. Ixchel teaches her how to form small animals from clay, giving her the first lessons in the art of pottery. When Balaam and his son return, tired but content, the family gathers together again. They share the stories of their day. Balaam tells of a toucan he saw in a tall tree. Ixchel shows off the cloth she has just finished. The children chatter about their games. Dinner, again, with tortillas and beans, but with some stewed vegetables, is the warmest and most precious moment of the day. When night has completely fallen, Balaam takes his son outside. The sky is now a black velvet blanket, glittering with countless stars. He is not a priest, he cannot read the complex glyphs of the long count, but he can read the farmer's sky. "Look, my son," he says, pointing to a faint, bright path across the sky. "That is the Waka Chan, the raised-up sky tree. It is the road the souls travel." He points to the 3 bright stars of Orion's belt. "Those are the 3 hearthstones of the god's fire. And that fuzzy cloud there," he says, pointing to the Orion Nebula, "that is the smoke rising from their fire." He teaches his son how to find the North Star, the star that never moves, the guide for those who travel at night. He teaches him how to recognize when the Pleiades constellation rises, signaling the coming of the rains. For them, the sky was not a distant, cold space. It was a friend, a guide, a giant and reliable agricultural calendar. They were not just people of corn, they were also people of the stars. Their lives were woven from 2 rhythms, the rhythm of the earth and the rhythm of the heavens. The night grows late, and Balaam's family drifts off to sleep. In a corner of the hut, on a small altar, Ixchel has placed a small tortilla and a single flower. It is a gift for the Alakzab, the small mischievous spirits of the forest and the home, to ask them to protect the family from harm. They sleep, the ordinary people of the Maya civilization. Their lives were not recorded on stone monuments, their names were not chanted in royal hymns, but they were the foundation. They were the millions of Balaams and Ixchels who tilled the soil, wove the cloth, raised the new generations, and looked up at the stars with a familiar reverence. They were the ones who built the pyramids with their labor, who fed the kings and priests with the corn they grew. They are the quietest but most eternal echoes of the Maya. Sleep now, and dream of a simple life, where happiness is found in a warm tortilla, in a beautiful piece of cloth, and in the light of the distant stars. Dream of the people of corn and stars. Chapter 8. The Collapse That Whispers. The jungle was still there. It was the same jungle that had witnessed the arrival of the first humans, the same jungle that had reluctantly retreated to make way for fields of corn and cities of stone. But the jungle had never truly left. It had only been waiting, patiently. Imagine a vine, thin but persistent. For centuries, it could only send its tendrils to the very edge of the stone plaza at Calakmul. It felt the vibrations of thousands of footsteps, heard the music of ceremonies. But it waited. The roots of an old ceiba tree, contained by the foundation of a temple, also waited patiently. They grew slowly, not rushing, just gently testing the smallest cracks in the stone. The jungle possessed something that even the greatest kings did not: endless time. And it was listening to the first whispers of change. The first whisper came from the earth. In his milpa, a farmer named Keen, a descendant of Balaam from long ago, noticed something was wrong. The earth seemed tired. Though he worked as hard as his father and grandfather, the ears of corn he harvested were a little smaller each year. The topsoil seemed thinner, and after every rain, he saw more of it wash away. He looked to the sky. The sky, too, seemed to have changed. The rain god, Chak, had become unpredictable. Some years he would grant no rain for months on end, and the young corn plants would wither under the burning sun. In other years, he would send torrential downpours that turned the fields to mud and washed everything away. The stars that his grandfather had taught him to read no longer seemed to be an accurate guide. The harmonious rhythm between the heavens and the earth, the rhythm his ancestors had lived by, seemed to have lost a beat. The second whisper came from the palace. In the heart of the city, the divine Ahau also felt the unease. He saw the worry in the eyes of the farmers who came to pay tribute. He heard the hushed rumors in the marketplaces. The faith of the people seemed to be wavering. He, who was supposed to be able to speak with the gods, who was responsible for maintaining the cosmic order, seemed to be losing that connection. To reassure the people and himself, he ordered more magnificent ceremonies. More sacrifices were offered. New temples were built, demanding more labor from the already exhausted farmers. New stone stelae were carved, but if you looked closely, the face of the Ahau on the stone no longer had the confident expression of his ancestors. It had a trace of anxiety, of strain. The whisper here was one of doubt. Were the gods still listening? Were the kings still worthy? The third whisper came from the roads. The white Sakbiab causeways that had once been symbols of power and connection were now quieter. The caravans of traders bringing jade from the Motagua River Valley, shells from the coast, obsidian from the highlands, no longer came as often. There were rumors of small but persistent wars between cities. Not the great battles for dominance like those between Tikal and Calakmul in the old days. These were struggles for dwindling resources, for water, for fertile land, for salt. The whisper on the roads was one of fear and division. The Maya world seemed to be shrinking in on itself. The decline did not come like a hurricane. It came like a long drought, slowly sapping the life away. Then one day, in one of the cities, perhaps Kopan, a sculptor was putting the final touches on a stone stela. He carved the date in the long count, a series of complex numbers and glyphs that had recorded the history of the dynasty for centuries. He did not know it, but this would be the last dated monument ever raised in his city. After him, no one would do this work again. Not because they had forgotten how, but because there was no longer a reason to. The grand story, carved in stone, had abruptly stopped. The river of time in the long count seemed to have flowed into a desert and vanished. The departure was not a panicked flight from a burning city. It was a quiet decision made in thousands of homes. Cain and his family sat by their dying fire. They no longer had enough corn stored to last through the dry season. His youngest child was sick and thin. He looked at his wife, and in her eyes he saw the same sadness and desperation. "There is nothing left for us here," he said softly. His wife nodded, her eyes welling with tears. "They say that to the north, near the sea. The land is still good. The people live in smaller villages without kings who demand so much." The decision was made. It broke their hearts. To leave the land of their ancestors, to leave the familiar temples where they had prayed, was the hardest thing. But they had to leave, to survive. The next morning they gathered their few belongings, some clothes, a few pieces of pottery, the last precious seeds of corn. They did not walk alone. Several neighboring families did the same. They formed a small, silent stream of people leaving the city. As he passed through the great plaza, Cain looked up at the magnificent pyramids one last time. They still stood, proud and silent, but to him they now seemed like empty tombs. The gods had already left. And so the cities began to empty. Family by family, village by village. The central plaza, once humming with the sound of people, now held only the sound of the wind. The market, once filled with all manner of goods, now had only a few crooked stalls. The sound of children's laughter no longer echoed. The last priests, the day keepers, also left. They performed a final ritual in the cold temples, the fire on the altar dwindling until it was just a thin wisp of smoke rising to the sky before disappearing. They closed the doors to the temples, and darkness fell upon the colorful murals, the mysterious glyphs. The city had fallen asleep, and once the people had gone, the jungle began its return. The wind, the god of breath, now blew through the empty corridors. It no longer carried prayers, but the seeds of wild plants, sowing them in the cracks of the stone floors. The rain of the god Chak, the rain they had once so desperately prayed for, now fell without asking. The water washed away the last footprints, seeped into the limestone mortar, and nourished the moss and lichen. A thin green veil began to cover the stairs and the walls, and the tree roots, the patient waiters, began their work. The roots of the strangler fig, the banyan, the ceiba, slowly but surely worked their way into the cracks, using the latent power of life to pry the stones from their places. The floors of the palaces cracked open. The walls of the temples collapsed, not from war, but from the persistent embrace of the jungle. The pyramids were no longer sharp, man-made structures. They were gradually eroded, covered by a thick layer of earth and vegetation, becoming green hills once more, just like the natural hills around them. Their sharp lines were softened by time and nature. The jaguar, the symbol of royalty, now truly walked the palace stairs. It was no longer a symbol. It was an animal reclaiming its territory. The monkeys, descendants of the wooden people, swung from the branches of trees that grew from the roofs of the temples. The jungle did not destroy the city. It embraced it. It was taking back what belonged to it. It was covering the dream of humans with a green blanket of forgetting. The city was not dead. It was merely in a very deep sleep. The collapse of the great Maya urban centers in the southern lowlands was not the end of the Maya people. It was only the end of a chapter. A chapter that was glorious and brilliant, but also too heavy, too tired. The people had not vanished. They had simply set down the burden of the stone cities and walked away. They carried their language, their stories, their gods, and their memory of corn and the stars with them. They went north, to the lakes of the Yucatan, to the highlands, to begin again, more humbly, more sustainably. The whisper of the collapse was not a scream of despair. It was the gentle sigh of Mother Earth, as her children finally learned a lesson in humility. It was a soft wind, turning a great page in a very long story, preparing for a new chapter to be written. Sleep now, and dream of the cities sleeping peacefully in the arms of the jungle. Do not be sad. Know that this was not an end, but a transition, a promise that life in some way will always go on. Chapter 9. Echoes Through Time. The Maya that remained. The wind had turned the page on the chapter of the great cities, but the story of the Maya people did not end. They did not vanish into the jungle like the morning mist. They walked on, and they continued to live. Imagine small streams of people, over many generations, moving across the land. They were like rivers, searching for new lowlands to gather and form new lakes. Some went north, to the drier Yucatan Peninsula, where the sacred cenotes, the natural wells, promised an endless supply of water. There, new cities rose again, like Chichen Itza and Uxmal, with a different architectural style, a new spirit. Others went up into the highlands, where the air was cool and the valleys were cradled by majestic volcanoes, to the lands around Lake Atitlan in modern-day Guatemala. They rebuilt their lives, not with great pyramids, but with strong village communities. They were still the children of corn and stars. Then another storm came, a storm from across the ocean. Men with pale skin, dressed in iron armor, carrying crosses and weapons that made thunder. They came on great ships like floating mountains. They brought with them a new god, a new king from far away, and strange diseases that the Maya body had never known. This was a trial even greater than drought or war. Their temples were destroyed. Their sacred books made of bark paper, which held centuries of knowledge about history and astronomy, were burned to ash. They were forced to follow a new faith, to speak a new language. Many thought that this, surely, was the true end of the Maya people. But they were wrong. The Maya were not extinguished. They simply bent before the storm, like a flexible reed on the riverbank, not standing rigid like a great ceiba tree only to be broken. They had learned the art of survival. They shielded the flame of their culture, not letting it die, but keeping it smoldering, passed down quietly from generation to generation. If you want to find the Maya today, do not look in the ruins. Go to a small village in the highlands of Guatemala and listen. Can you hear it? It is the sound of a grandmother speaking to her granddaughter. She is not speaking Spanish, she is speaking Quiche, one of more than 20 Maya dialects that still exist. The sounds she makes, the words she uses for the sun, the moon, the corn, and for love, are the same sounds her ancestors used thousands of years ago. A language is not just a tool for communication. It is a treasure chest that holds an entire world view. As long as the language lives, the culture never dies. Look at how they live their faith. On a Sunday, you might see that same grandmother, dressed in her brightly embroidered huipil, going to a Catholic church that was built from the stones of an old temple. She lights a candle before the statue of a saint. But in her heart, that saint might also have the face of the rain, god Cha'ak, or a mountain god who protects her village. On the church floor, she might arrange flower petals and candles in a certain pattern, a silent prayer according to the 260-day Tzolk'in calendar. They did not abandon their old gods. They gave them a new cloak. They blended the two worlds of faith together, creating something unique and their own. This was not betrayal. It was wisdom. The gods of the forest, of the corn, of the mountains are still revered, just more quietly. And of course, they are still the people of corn. Go to a market day in Chichicastenango. The scene is a blaze of color. Women from all the surrounding villages come, each village with its own distinct style of huipil and hair ribbon, turning the market into a living rainbow. They sell corn, beans, and squash. The three sisters are still grown on small terraced plots on the mountainsides. They sell intricate hand-woven textiles, which still bear the diamond patterns of the cosmos, the serpents, and the gods. Life flows on, colorful and vibrant. In a quiet corner of the market or in a small house on a hillside, you might find an old man, an Iji. He is a modern-day keeper, a direct inheritor of the ancient astronomer priests. He does not live in a palace. He lives among the villagers. A young couple comes to see him. They want to know which day is a good day to get married. The Ajkij does not use stone monuments. He lays out a small cloth. On it, he places red seeds from the coral tree, crystals and kernels of corn. He murmurs ancient prayers, counting the seeds according to the cycles of the Tzolk'in, the sacred calendar that was never forgotten, passed on by word of mouth and kept in secret through 500 years of conquest. He reads the energy of the day and gives his advice to the young couple. This is not a performance for tourists. This is a living spiritual practice. The sacred heart of the Tzolk'in is still beating, and its rhythm still guides the lives of millions of Maya people. Their existence has not always been easy. They have faced discrimination, poverty, and struggles to protect their land and their cultural rights. But they are not passive victims. They are fighters. They fight with persistence, using the tools of the modern world to gain recognition, to protect their languages in schools, and to preserve the sacred forests of their ancestors. They are an extraordinary testament to the power of resilience. The civilization of the stone cities may have declined, but its spirit did not. That spirit lives in the language they speak, in the patterns they weave, in the way they plant their corn, and in their reverence for the earth and the sky. Let us return to the grandmother and her small grandchild. Night has fallen on the highland village. The grandmother looks at the sleeping child, her face so peaceful. In the child's cheeks, she sees the image of those who came before. She knows that when the child grows up, she will face a complex world, a world of mobile phones and the internet. But she will also know how to grind corn on the metate. She will speak Spanish at school, but she will speak Quiche with her grandmother. She is a child of two worlds, and that is her strength. The Maya did not disappear. They are here. They are living. They are breathing. Their echo is not a faint sound from the distant past. It is a strong, resilient heartbeat, beating in the chest of the present. Sleep now. And dream of a fire that never goes out, a fire that was shielded through the greatest storms and is still burning, warm and full of hope, in the hearts of the Maya who remained. Chapter 10. A Dream. Beneath the ceiba tree. The sun of a golden afternoon was slowly setting in the west, painting the sky above the city of Palenque a deep amber. The light slanted through the leaves, creating shimmering pools of sunlight on the ground. On the edge of the city, not far from the graceful temples and the magnificent palace, stood a giant ceiba tree. It was called Waka Chan, the World Tree, a living ladder connecting the three realms. Its roots reached deep into the underworld of Xibalba. Its trunk stood tall in the world of the living, and its canopy stretched up to touch the heavens of the gods. Beneath this great tree, leaning against one of its massive roots that looked like the shoulder of a gentle giant, a young boy was sitting. His name was Keen, which means sun or day. He was just an ordinary child. His father was a potter, and his mother was a weaver. All day, he'd been running and playing games of tag with his friends through the palace corridors and hide-and-seek behind the stone stele. Now, he was tired. His breathing slowed, and in the gentle shade of the ceiba tree, his eyes slowly closed. And the boy began to dream. The dream did not come in a clear story. It came as a flow of feelings, a series of ethereal images. First, he felt a deep silence, a vast and tranquil water. Then he felt the earth rising beneath him, warm and solid. He smelled the scent of the primal forest after a rain, the smell of damp earth and wild flowers. Chapter 1. Then that scent changed to a more familiar one, the smell of a hearth fire and roasting corn. He saw an image of the first villages, small fires flickering in the night, people gathered together, sharing the first tortillas. Chapter 2. The scene suddenly grew vast. Mountains of white stone rose from the jungle, reaching straight for the stars. He saw himself standing in a great plaza, feeling small before the towering pyramids, and he felt the pride of a whole people who had built them. Chapter 3. Then he heard a sound, not with his ears, but with his whole soul. It was the clicking sound of invisible wheels of time, turning slowly and steadily. He saw numbers and symbols dancing, weaving the tapestry of fate. Chapter 4. From high above he saw the kind faces of the gods smiling. They were molding people from a golden corn dough and breathing life into them. He felt that he too was made from that same dough. Chapter 5. Then the stage changed. He saw two twin brothers, bright as the sun and moon, dancing with a black ball in a strange court. Their game was both a dance and a battle, and he understood that it was the story of life conquering death. Chapter 6. He saw familiar images, his father bent over his potter's wheel, his mother sitting and weaving, her fingers flying as she created complex patterns. He felt the peace of daily life, a life woven from corn and stars. Chapter 7. But then, the dream began to change. He saw a different kind of silence fall over his city. Not the silence of the beginning, but of emptiness. He saw green vines, like the fingers of the jungle, gently embracing the temples, pulling them back into the earth. He saw streams of people walking away in silence, their faces not filled with fear, but with a quiet, sad determination. Chapter 8. The dream grew fierce. A great storm came from the sea, bringing with it strange, loud noises and bizarre flashes of light. He saw a tiny flame, flickering violently, nearly extinguished. But then he saw hands, many hands, cupping themselves around the flame, shielding it from the gale. They would not let it go out. Time in the dream suddenly sped up. He saw images so strange he could not believe them. Horseless carriages moved on black roads. Buildings scraped the sky, made of a material that glittered like obsidian, but was as clear as a cenote. He saw people holding small, glowing rectangles in their hands, staring into them. This world was alien. He felt lost. But then, among these strange sights, he saw familiar things. He saw a woman in a bustling market, wearing a huipil with the same diamond pattern his mother wove. He heard a child speaking to her mother in a language he could understand. He saw a man on a distant mountainside, using a stick to poke holes to plant corn, his movements the same as his father's. And he saw a grandmother, sitting by a fire, telling her grandchild the story of the hero twins. Chapter 9. The tiny flame that had flickered in the storm was still burning, warm and steady. Cain slowly opened his eyes. The sun had almost set. The twilight sky was as red as the feathers of a macaw. The dream had been so strange, both familiar and foreign, sad and hopeful. He did not understand everything he had seen, but he understood the feeling it left behind. He looked up at the giant ceiba tree. He looked at its roots, anchored deep in the earth, in the past, in the world of the ancestors and the lords of Xibalba. He looked at the sturdy trunk, in the world where he now lived, and he looked at the branches reaching for the sky, toward the future, toward the stars and the worlds he could never know. And in that moment, the boy Cain understood something, not with his mind, but with his heart. His people were like this ceiba tree. This city, however magnificent, might one day fall asleep, just as the leaves fall in the dry season. But the roots would never die. The roots of their language, their faith, their stories, and their love for corn were too deep for any storm to destroy. Their spirit would always find a way to grow, to sprout new leaves, and to reach for the light. A deep sense of peace filled the boy's soul. He was no longer afraid of the future, nor did he cling too tightly to the present. He simply felt that he was part of something much larger than himself, a single small leaf on a great ancient tree. Cain stood up, brushing the dirt from his loincloth. In the distance, he could see the first torches being lit in the city. He began to run toward the light, toward the evening meal that was waiting, toward the embrace of his mother and father. And as he ran, the echo of the Maya civilization was no longer just in the stones or the distant stars. It was right here, in the beating heart of a child, in the resilience of a people who had learned to bend in the storm, in the dream of a sacred tree that connects the past to the future. And now, as our story fades like the last ember of a sacred fire, may your dreams carry you deeper into the jungles of time, where stone whispers and starlight never forget. If sleep has already found you, may it be calm, may it be kind. And if you're still with me, know that I'll be right here, waiting to tell the next tale. Good night, traveler, and thank you for dreaming with me. This has been Myths for Sleep.